Great. Good morning and an afternoon, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure to be back hosting another virtual event. This is the CWTA and the 5G Canada Council trying to make sure that Canadians have a better understanding of what 5G really is. But my name's Robert Giz. Mon nom c'est Robert Giz. Je suis le président. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Wireless Telecommunications Association. I'm coming to you live today from Prince Edward Island. And when I think of where I'm coming from and what we're talking about today, I think it has a lot in common. I go back to forming our great nation of Canada and what really brought us together as a country and allowed us to become a powerhouse economically, socially, over the last 150 years. And here in Prince Edward Island in 1864, there was a meeting taking place between the four Atlantic provinces. At that time, Sir John A. Macdonald and a bunch of upper Canadians and lower Canadians showed up to crash what we thought was going to be a conference to either form our own nation, talk about forming Canada, or talk about joining the United States, actually. Those upper and lower Canadians actually convinced us to form Canada. And the backbone of forming Canada was the railway. The railway was what brought Canada together. And what do I think is going to bring Canada together again? That's going to allow us to be an economic powerhouse culturally, economically, socially, so that we're able to compete with anyone in the world. It's going to be 5G. That is the next thing that is going to allow us to compete on a worldwide basis. But a lot needs to be done. Number one, we know that we need supports from our federal government on the regulatory front around supporting facilities-based competition, those companies that go out and build the networks. If you do not support companies that build the networks, we will fall behind in 5G. So we need to make sure that there's going to be an regulatory environment that encourages investment, that encourages facilities-based competition, so that Canada can be in a position to compete. We've done lots of studies on 5G over the years, and past studies sponsored by the CWTA have looked at the economic impact that 5G will have on Canada, as well as the benefits it will bring to cities and rural communities. We have also looked at the impact that 5G will have on reducing Canada's carbon footprint. All of these reports can be found on our cwta.ca website or at 5gcc.ca website as well. Through the adoption of 5G, we know that it will create approximately 250,000 new permanent jobs between now and 2026. It will add an incremental $40 billion in GDP. It will need a $26 billion investment from facilities-based providers. It will lower down our carbon footprint. It will allow companies to compete. It will bring Canadians together. It will allow rural communities to compete at an equal level with urban communities. It will allow Canada to be a leader into the future. So with all these things taking place, we believe that it's important that we bring experts together to help talk about what 5G will mean for Canada, for individuals, and to help really improve our way of life. And today we're very fortunate to have some extremely knowledgeable speakers. We've got Luciano Ramos, SVP of Core Networks and Engineering from Rogers. We've got Bruce Roding, VP Wireless Technology, Bell Mobility. We've got Chris Pearson, who I've had the opportunity to see, who speaks all over the world, so do our other members as well. But Chris Pearson is president of 5G Americas. And we have our very own Eric Smith, our SVP at the CWTA, who will moderate today's panel to talk about the possibilities that will come with 5G. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Eric Smith.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Really excited to be here today and to moderate this panel of 5G experts. Each panelist is going to provide some opening remarks, and we're going to be starting with Chris Pearson, followed by Luciano Ramos, followed by Bruce Rodin. I'm then going to moderate a discussion on some of the topics they've raised in their opening remarks and also throw in some new topics as we go along. And of course, we encourage audience participation. With that in mind, if you have a question during the event, please use the Ask a Question button on the panel, lower part of the panel, and type in your question. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but I will say we're very pleased to say we have over 375 registrants for this event, so we won't be able to get to everybody. With that having said, I'd like to invite Chris Pearson up to the virtual stage, and he's going to provide an overview of 5G from his perspective as president of 5G Americas.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And it's an honor to be here and speaking in front of everyone today. My opening remarks are really, basically fairly straightforward to providing really just a status of 5G, kind of like where are we with the actual technology deployments and where are we with forecasts. So let me just go to the next slide. So first, many of you may or may not know who 5G Americas is. 5G Americas is a industry wireless association. We're based in the United States, and we're focused on progressing mobile wireless communications throughout North, Central, and South America. So the Americas, as we would say. And with that, we work in three different areas. We work in technical technical facilitation and coordination, where we try to get everyone on the same page moving forward with the technological developments. We work in regulatory policy throughout the Americas, things like spectrum, cell siting, all these types of things. And finally, we work on industry education, really making sure that all the key stakeholders throughout the industry and the wireless ecosystem has a great understanding of really what is going on in the technology as far as where we are and where we're going. Next slide. So in today's talk that I'm going to give, I'm just going to cover things very, very quickly, but a 5G global overview, a regional overview, wireless in the US, kind of a snapshot of where the United States is. And finally, what does it mean, this just idea of 5G technology innovation? I mean, what is that? What does that mean? So next slide, please. So here's my 5G global overview. Next slide. So many people say, well, you heard the opening remarks a few minutes ago, 5G can, really do some amazing things and just create jobs and economic impact, start to look at some of societal issues and maybe solve those problems. But how's it doing? Well, actually, if you look at 5G compared to other generational technologies, that would be 1G, which, as we know, there was lots of different variations of analog, but 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G is the fastest growing generation of any mobile wireless technology. It is actually growing subscribers at a faster rate, quarter over quarter, year over year so far, than any other technology. Now, 5G Americas loves 5G, obviously, but we also love LTE. And LTE is a great technology and will continue to be a great technology for a long time. But 5G is even growing faster than what LTE did. So again, 5G is on its way and starting off very fast. Next slide. If you look at a global chart, you'll see that this kind of is an interesting chart because I don't know if it truly reflects everything in a statistic, because North America is doing very well in their deployments and moving quite fastly. But if you also look at the Asia Pacific and the amount of population in Asia Pacific and the fact that they were fairly early in a lot of their deployments, they also are a leader in 5G as well. But North America is actually doing very outstanding when it comes to 5G subscribers as well as deployments. Next slide. Worldwide, again, we are at a very fast start for 3GPP, 5G commercial deployments. If you look at overall, there's 163 5G commercial deployments worldwide. 10 of those are in North America. 13 of those are actually in Latin America. We will be well over 200 commercial deployments we expect by the end of this year. And remember, this is during one of the biggest pandemics that we've had. This is during COVID-19 when when really the world came to a stop only about 365 days ago. So the fact that we're at 163 commercial deployments really shows you what the promised potential and really the great operators that work with their vendor partners around the world. Next slide, please. As far as the forecast, you'll see on this chart, we are going to make a great deal of progress by the year end of 2021. By 2023, we expect to be at about over 2 billion. And by 2025, we expect to have 3.4 billion 5G connections. Now that when we say connections, that means it could be an IoT sensor, it could be a smartphone, could be your laptop, could be an enterprise user, could be your C2V2X automobile that's connected. But by 2025, we expect 3.4 billion connections with our partner Umdia. Next slide, please. So let's go a little bit from the global viewpoint that I gave you to kind of set up our discussions today to a regional 5G overview. Next slide, please. North Americans love 5G. As I've said in many of my speeches around the world, we are really probably in the second inning of a 9-inning baseball game. This is the start of the baseball season later this year in the United States, or later this week in the United States. But when I say second inning, it's because there's so much more that's going to happen with 5G. But even with what we've done already, among G7 countries, Canada had the third fastest 5G as far as technology performance, and the U.S. ranked as the highest time spent on a 5G device. So already we're seeing North America is starting to embrace 5G technology. Next slide. And the forecast is quite positive. You'll see that it really is the trend, very much follows the global trend of 5G uptake. By 2023, we'll be over 275 million. By 2025, we start going toward that 500 million connections in North America. So again, the trend for 5G is quite positive. We have really in the beginning stages, that second inning of a 9-inning baseball game, but we are making progress, and we do expect that this progress will continue over time, as you see into 2025. Next slide, please. Now, in Canada, I mean, I know you have some experts that we're going to be talking very specifically, and we've already heard some great opening comments about 5G in Canada. So I won't go too far into this, but what you see is that 5G has really started to pick up speed, no pun intended, in Canada, and it's off to a very, very strong start. If you look at these statistics, it shows you the importance of 5G, not just as a technology, but also as importance as 5G is to the economy, as well as to the nation. And those were, very much the opening remarks that you heard earlier today, that 5G is not just a technology, it's a solution. It's about meeting the promise and potential of tackling potential markets and new markets that will help society. Next slide, please. In Canada, we've seen a very quick start. This kind of gives you an idea of where we are as far as 5G. But again, these statistics are just the beginning stages. We know that there's a long road to go as far as the uptake of subscribers, and that we are in the very beginning stages of seeing this growth as really as the overall majority at some point of Canadians of getting 5G technology. The deployments are continuing at a very brisk pace, as well as the number of devices that actually are getting out into the marketplace for subscribers to get. So we see a great potential of what 5G is doing, but also great momentum in the 5G Canadian market. Next slide, please. So in the United States, this is where we're based. I mean, we handle the Americas region. I'll just give you a quick snapshot because we do seem to make a lot of headlines in the last few months in the United States. So next slide, please. So we have our three tier one national carriers, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon, have done an outstanding job of deploying 5G technology in the nation. Each has come really, if you look at a few years ago, probably came at it from a different place. And a lot of that, if you look at the third-party analysts, would say is because of the spectrum capabilities that they had, or their spectrum holdings that they had. So they all, kind of started at different places as far as the markets that they were moving forward, as far as deployments, and the type of deployments that they were doing for 5G. But one thing is certain, all three are doing a great job. They are moving extremely fast in the marketplace for providing 5G capabilities, and we're blanketing the United States with 5G for consumers and for enterprise users. Next slide, please. You'll see we made a lot of headlines, most recently with our C-band auctions, and our C-band auctions showed how important it was to have a spectrum, which is the oxygen for our industry. C-band, as we would say, hit the sweet spot. That is our mid-band spectrum in the United States, and the sweet spot being coverage and capacity both. And this chart gives you an idea of the amounts of spectrum after that C-band auction. So what you see is, most of these operators were in great need moving forward with mid-band spectrum. We did have a T-Mobile who did merged with Sprint, and Sprint did have mid-band holdings already at 2.5. But in general, that auction and the billions and billions and billions of dollars that was raised for the U.S. Treasury really showed how important this mid-band spectrum is. Next slide, please. But as we say at 5G Americas, for 5G to reach its ultimate potential, the real promise and potential of 5G, we need low-band spectrum, mid-band spectrum, as well as millimeter wave or high-band spectrum. It's going to take a portfolio of different types of spectrum and spectrum characteristics to reach the potential of 5G. And that's why when we, as an association, talk to governments throughout the Americas, we emphasize the need for more licensed, internationally harmonized spectrum, and that is in the low, mid, and high band spectrum. We've seen obviously a lot of interest and coalescence around the mid-band spectrum the past few years in the Asia Pacific areas, in Latin America, in Europe, and now obviously in the US and North America. And we expect that to continue. But again, the big picture is we are going to need low, mid, and high band spectrum for 5G. Next slide, please. And then where is this technology headed? What does it mean to have 5G technology versus 4G, LTE, or even 3G from some people are still utilizing around the world? Next slide, please. Well, 5G is addressed as far as the architecture when it was developed at 3GPP to address new vertical use cases. That's how it was designed. So we're basically, as a technology, creating this innovation ecosystem. And that innovation ecosystem means that we are being technology enablers for other technologies, and at the same time being enabled by other technologies. So when you see announcements about cloud partnerships or mobile edge computing or virtualization of someone's networks, these are all part of this idea that 5G is an innovative technology designed in the architecture really to be able to enable and be enabled other technologies. And that enablement creates the ability for us to tackle new markets, new vertical markets like manufacturing, healthcare, education, e-government, all these types of areas that we've had a little bit of a struggle before in our previous designs of our generational technologies. So 5G, and I know we'll talk about this on our panel, is about innovation and what it can do differently and to attack and get to new markets for mobile technology. Next slide, please. And finally, I just say, thank you so much for allowing me to be in front of this great audience today and part of this panel. I look forward to the questions that are going to be coming, and I'll turn it back over to Eric. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Chris. That was a great overview of things. It's a big topic and hard to give a real good distillation like that. So I really appreciate your efforts there. And we look forward to having you back as part of our panel discussion. Next, we're going to turn it over to Luciano Ramos from Rogers. Rogers has been doing a lot of exciting things with its 5G rollout, and he's going to just provide his view on 5G from a Rogers perspective. Thanks.
Well, first of all, thank you, Robert, Eric, and great presentation, Chris. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to this session. You know, I am passionate about innovation and technology. I'm super excited to be here talking about something so transformational such as 5G. And what we're doing here at Rogers to really move the Canadian country as an economy and as a country forward as a global leader in the 5G landscape. So, you know, from my perspective, from the Rogers perspective, the way we see 5G is around a transformational technology that will bring new capabilities that will enable transformational industries. You know, Chris touched upon this very quickly on 5G is a set of different new standards that were built from the ground up to address specific use cases, to actually go and fix problems that before traditional 4G connectivity could not address. And we're going to see a lot of these coming into the innovation work that we do. But today, you know, our industry is an inflection point. You know, we need an ability to scale. We need to make 5G a reality for Canadians. We've been investing heavily on being the first network that launched 5G services here in Canada. We also launched our standalone core late last year, but we are at the early stages of our 5G journey. You know, 5G will bring incremental advancements in technology as we deploy new capabilities, and these capabilities are built and enabled for our partners to consume and really create new use cases. You know, things like fixed wireless access over 5G. You know, these things become so relevant today in supporting our rural connectivity needs and really bringing connectivity to those remote communities that today are underserved, completely underserved. For example, in Alberta, in BC, where they really need connectivity now more than ever. You heard Chris said that Canada is one of the best networks in the world, and our geography and our population density does not make it easy for us as operators to build the best 5G network. It requires a lot of investment, heavy investments, to deploy a 5G national network to really be able to cover everybody. Those are the challenges that we face in terms of investments. You know, our geography, it's a very large geography. So that's why we must partner with industries, government, academia. We need to get access to rights of way. We need to get access to assets that we can actually put our small cells so we can actually fast track this deployment of 5G. 5G is going to be a generational change for most of us. You know, we will enable millions of connections. You know, we will be able to really have sensors in everything that we can think of. Today, 4G does not allow us to do that. Today, 4G has a runway in terms of the amount of devices we can plug in. With 5G, there's really no limit. There's really no limit. So we're going to be able to have millions and millions of connections, either smartphones or sensors, everything we do. We're going to expand our coverage, our capacity exponentially. You know, we're talking about 10 to 15 times more capacity that we are used to in 4G. We're going to provide low latency services. You know, today, our 4G networks in Canada specifically are top in the world in terms of latency and speeds. Imagine what we can do when we continue to drive down the latency, when we make our network more responsive. When you press that send button, everything comes back faster than it used to be. And add to that the amount of data that we're going to be able to transfer with the new next generation technologies and the new spectrum is going to become available. When you put all these things together, all these building blocks together, I think that the future is amazing. You know, the opportunity for us to build new use cases on this 5G network and as this 5G foundation that we're going to be building, it's honestly, in some cases, we don't even know what's going to look like. You know, when we built 4G many years ago, we didn't envision an Apple App Store. We didn't envision a smartphone to pick up the way it built. We didn't envision the Silicon Valley companies that were built on top of the connectivity that we built. You know, 5G will bring things like that, things that we don't know yet. So it's important that we invest heavy. It's important that we have the best network in Canada so we can actually build the next generation Apples or App Stores or Shopify's out right here from Canada. I think the innovation community here and the startup community here in Canada is huge. And there's massive opportunities for us to work closely with them. We're working very closely with our university partners to research and develop 5G applications that we will run on our 5G network. And these are the capabilities for the future, you know, from all the way from smart cities to digital mining, mobile edge compute, early earthquake detection, drone tracking and drone delivery, and many more use cases that are really come down as we deploy this great technology across all of Canada. So I'm personally super excited about what's coming. I'm looking forward to seeing the innovation that's going to come out, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. So thank you, Eric and team, for having me here.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Luciano. And next, I'd like to invite onto the virtual stage Bruce from Bell. Take it away, Bruce.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for the CWTA for the opportunity to do 5G in 5 minutes. Just a quick overview from 5G from our perspective at Bell. You know, when we think of 5G, we really think of, you know, speed. We think about latency, which is, again, the quickness of the channel, and then the density of the traffic. How much traffic can you support with the channel? These are all attributes of 5G technology that set it apart and allow it and enable it to create some tremendous new use cases that we'll talk about in a second too. When we think about speed in Canada, you know, we've had strong networks. We have had in LTE 4 carrier CA run well over a gigabit, you know, at peak theoretical. Our early 5G augments that. This is the so-called non-standalone, where you really add a new radio channel to the LTE to get a 5G deployment, the initial 5G deployments. And in Canada, again, that gets us up into the 1.5 gigabit range, which is, you know, very respectable, you know, on a global stage. But the ecosystem is moving past that. You know, in non-standalone, you're really tied to the LTE channel for signaling. So standalone is really the opportunity for the 5G channels to stand on their own. And the core network has to be dissected and replicated with new elements. But the key attribute, though, is the ability to push the core network out to the edge. And that's where you get the latency improvements. That the core is closer to the subscriber, you know, where we see typically 24 milliseconds today. We could reasonably expect to see less than half of that. And that's really enabled by that proximity. It sets up the opportunity, you know, today where we would switch in a handful of data centers. You know, our infrastructure is virtualized at this point, but you know, localized data centers can manage the traffic and provide efficiency. And because we have 2,000 COs, we can get very close and proximate to every cell site. So that's a real advantage of the network, because it can be broken down like that. And of course, that sets up the opportunity for mobile, or what we would call multi-access edge computing. I think it was originally called mobile edge computing. It's really multi-access edge computing now. It can really be an environment to host applications, hybrid cloud, public cloud, private cloud capability, very close to the customers. Another attribute of 5G is the concept of slicing, where, you know, not everybody can have really ultra reliable, low latency capability. You really want to apply that kind of capability to services and applications that really need it. You know, someone who's a kid surfing in the back of the car have a different requirement than, you know, smart grid traffic or public safety traffic, right? So embedded in the concept of 5G is the ability to segment traffic and identify, you know, use cases specifically that require you know, really enhanced functionality, enhanced capability. And on the traffic density side, people talk about, lots and lots of extra sites. And, the challenge in wireless networks is mapping the traffic density that's being generated by the customers and the ability of the network. And certainly when, Chris talked about millimeter wave, and there you get big channels, maybe, 20 times larger than an LTE channel. When you get up into those millimeter wave, you get the kind of distance that we typically see. So there would be incremental sites. I mean, those sites are not classic sites. They're really something on a telephone pole that's maybe the size of a couple of PCs stacked together and on the side of a pole. But you could see, an order of magnitude increase in the number of sites, 10x. So when you do the larger channels and the increased site density, you can see where you get the ability to generate traffic density that's many times, maybe 100 times greater than what you may see today. So the network inherently will be capable of sustaining more load. It'll be smarter in that it'll deliver capacity and traffic to the applications that really do need it. And the density of the traffic is really the key attribute there that will set it apart. I would say too that scaling in terms of traffic, in terms of connection density, LTE does run out of capacity to do, say 100,000 or 300,000 devices per square kilometer. You really can't scale LTE that way. 5G can scale that way. It will take a while for the device costs in 5G to get down to the point where you might reasonably expect to see a few 100,000 devices in a square kilometer, but it's really architected to do that. So when you really consider those key fundamental attributes, LTE enabled some tremendous changes and adaptations of existing business models, and even introduction of new business models. Think of where Uber is or what social media has done, even the streaming media and the impact of the media on media. With these new functionality, drone control, autonomous vehicles, even platooning of larger trucks on some of the major highways are all practical. And these are fundamentally need those kind of latency improvements to be practical and realizable. So, as we look at going forward and the capability of 5G, it's pretty exciting to think about the completely new business models that we haven't envisioned yet. They're going to be realized by what we're doing, and really it is fundamental to the country, fundamental to moving, efficiency forward and creating value in the economy. So we certainly look forward to participate in that. And with that, I'll hand it back to Eric and we can answer a few questions.
Great, thanks, Bruce, and thanks to everyone. So those great opening remarks, I think, really set the stage for a good discussion. I remind people, if you have questions, please type them in to ask a question feature on the platform. But I guess my first question really goes to Luciana and Bruce, because I want to acknowledge sort of where we are as a country right now, where we are as a world, and of course I'm talking about COVID. I'm sure most of us, when the news of COVID first broke, no one imagined it would be going on this long, or at least most people didn't. And early on, there were a lot of stories about the increase in network traffic, the resiliency of our networks, the changes overnight, really, of usage patterns of individuals. And generally, the news was the Canadian networks held up very well, were very robust and resilient. But I'm just wondering if there's anything you can share with us, just really maybe what we didn't see, the sort of behind the scenes view, if you have maybe even just an anecdote you can share about really what it was like for an operator such as yourself at those times. And maybe I'll start with Bruce and then go to Luciano.
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly the traffic surged in ways that it didn't normally. Like the mid-afternoon or the mid-morning traffic surged because so many people were working from home. But of course, the networks had been architected for streaming services, so they really didn't hit a limit in that sense. So it was a change. Of course, the downtown mobile traffic has changed, but there's just massive increase in rural traffic. But one item that comes to mind when you think about an example where the industry worked together to solve some problems. When CERB was announced and the call center in Ottawa was ready to go, and then I think maybe 7 or 8 days, they decided, we've got to send everybody home. So the call center shut down, everybody goes home, And like that's a massive challenge to deal with, routing of 1-800 numbers and just the local traffic. And between the owners of 1-800 numbers and the PSTN and the mobile networks work together to ensure that CERB happened pretty much seamlessly, right? There's massive surge in traffic. So it's an example where, we had worked together. There'd been some network, some spectrum loaning that went on just to manage peak in rural areas that, wasn't much talked about, but much appreciated. And, we did the right thing for customers. So, I think in general, the networks have held up pretty well, and we can be proud of that.
Luciano?
Yeah, so I'll echo the comments. I think what we saw through the pandemic was a huge traffic shift from the mobile network to our fixed network. As people really stay home and they move their business to working from home, we saw 50, 60, 70% on peak traffic hour of traffic on our fixed network, away from the mobile network. And I can tell you, I am proud of how the Canadian industry held up to these traffic shifts. This did not happen by accident. This happened because we've been heavily investing in our networks for multiple years. We didn't design our networks to be fixed mobile networks. We designed a mobile network and a fixed network, but the networks held extremely well, and that is because of the amazing work of our engineers. Same thing on Bell as well. And honestly, the collaboration in the industry, I have to echo on that point. We work really, really closely with our industry peers, and I can remember hours and hours on calls over the weekend, rerouting traffic, opening up capacity, adding capacity on routes that honestly we didn't expect to have traffic on. The 1-800 numbers is a toll-free number. It's a great example of collaboration. We work extremely close to Bell and Bell's organization to add overnight capacity to our 1-800 numbers. We deploy. I would call this, we deploy capacity that in over a weekend that otherwise would have taken us months to deploy. I think that's a testament of doing the right thing for our customers, doing the right thing for Canadians, and really putting aside all the other processes, forms, and the bureaucracy that entitles us to get two big organizations to work together. We put all that aside and we really deliver on what we needed to do. So I think it was a great testament on the power of our networks, and the power of collaboration in the industry when you have one common objective.
Great, thank you. So I have, again, and don't worry, Chris, I have some questions for you too, but I want to just get to a couple of technical things. When I look at the audience that we have today and look at, where they're from, et cetera, we have a broad spectrum, a lot of people who are going to be not as technical as you folk, obviously. But a couple of technical terms that get brought up a lot with respect to 5G. And I'm just wondering, just for the sake of our audience who may not understand but want to understand, you can give a very simple explanation of what the terms refer to and why they're important. And the first one is, Luciano, I know you mentioned how Rogers late last year announced the operator in Canada to first deploy a standalone core. Could you just tell our folks who don't fully appreciate it, what does standalone core mean and why is that important for 5G?
All right, so I'll do my best to bring it up a level on standalone core. So the way our networks, our mobile networks specifically, have evolved in the multiple generations, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, they have been incremental upgrades to the previous generation. Yeah, they have been kind of taking what we had as a foundation block, where it was a 2G network or a 3G network, where it was a 2G for voice. Then we kind of added data, some low-speed data sessions and basic capabilities on 3G. And then on that 3G network, we brought on top of it, we brought the LTE network and the 4G network, and we added faster speeds, we added a little bit more spectrum. But really, what we did was to kind of start building on top of an existing basic foundation that was built many, many years ago with the introduction of the first generation of wireless. With 5G, we introduced something called non-standalone networks, or non-standalone core this allowed us to continue that journey on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5G and really launch 5G services worldwide. Most of all the deployments you see today were built on what we call the 5G non-standalone, which is really the first introduction to 5G. It's like, it is part of the journey, it's the first step towards the journey, but it has a runway. It has limitations, because you kind of carry on the old limitations on the previous generation. You just make them fit for 5G. With 5G, we introduce a new concept, which is a standalone core, or 5G standalone, or 5G SA core, or multiple ways to say the same thing, which is really the first time we are rebuilding from the ground up 100% of the 5G core to support the next generation use cases. So it's a completely separate type of technology. It's built on top of the same technologies that the big companies in hyperscalers, we call them, the Googles, the Amazons of the world use. It's built on the same technologies and same foundation technologies, but it's really built for the next generation use cases. So what that allows us is to really turn on the key on these new use cases and really start building on for the next generation of 5, 6, 7, or 8Gs. Things like millimeter wave and low latency and all these things, network slicing, service orchestration. I don't want to introduce more terms to make it more complicated, but all these new technologies that are coming up could not be built on the old generation that was kind of backwards compatible. So standalone is the first enabler we need to put on the network to really enable those use cases and those next generation technologies that we're going to build as we go through this journey.
That's a great explanation, and thanks very much. And Bruce, for you, you mentioned the mobile edge computing, and I think you did a good job of explaining it briefly in terms of it's bringing the processing power and the processing closer to where it's needed. But just again for sort of the non-technical folks, how will that actually, do you envision that being deployed in Canada? Like, is that going to be, will the telcos deploy all the edge computing? Will it be public cloud edging? Will it be partnerships? Will it be on-premises? Or just a whole mix of things depending on what's needed?
Likely all of the above. I mean, there's certain applications that we can deploy on our private cloud, and today our core infrastructure is on a private cloud, and we're looking at a public cloud infrastructure. But public cloud infrastructure is likely to be in some edge data centers, all of them. There may be cases where there's on-premise compute capabilities or extension of the network. Remote mining, for instance, we're involved in one in Labrador where it's standalone, but it's extended back into the network. There they have reliability and latency issues. So it'll be a bit of all, but really all the hyperscalers will have presence in proximate to customers and can host applications. We'll be hosting applications in a variety of forms in a way that will allow very high performance of those applications on the network.
Okay, thanks. And Chris, a question, sometimes people ask me because they just know I follow the industry. And when they look at the United States, at least with the rollout of 5G, it's kind of a bit of a patchwork in the sense of, you had Verizon pushing the millimeter wave, you had T-Mobile with their sort of nationwide 5G, you had AT&T doing those things. Was that primarily a function of the spectrum holdings they had at the time? And are we seeing now with the C-band, et cetera, we're going to have more of a kind of cohesive approach, or at least similar approach by the carriers? What insights can you provide for us there?
Yeah, well, I can't. I'm not in their strategic war rooms, as they would say, to say. But if you kind of look at what's happened over time, they did come at it from different areas. And if you look at the areas that, as you said, some came at it from low band, some came from high band. But overall, it does appear that based on what each of them had in the cupboard, they decided that that's what they were going to do. But in essence, even though they came at it from different places, I think what you've seen is that they're all, going to be utilizing low, mid, and high band spectrum. And again, a lot of it will depend on what their portfolio of spectrum is, and that portfolio has, changed in the last few months because we saw the the results of the C-band auction, which were, like as I said, our U.S. Treasury has a lot of money coming in, billions and billions because of it. So, and that spectrum will come out in phases, as it's cleared by the C-band satellite operators. So, yeah, I would say, lessons learned are that everyone came from different places. Their reasoning, they would have to speak to, but I would say, yeah, we're all going to be, in the U.S., it's pretty apparent that you're going to use low, mid, and high band spectrum to really tackle those vertical use cases and provide that coverage, that capacity, and you do that with different areas of spectrum.
And another U.S. focused question is, I noticed, I think it was last year, Department of Defense, they were awarding, announced $600 million, I think, in awards for experimentation and testing of 5G in areas like mission planning, training, command and control, those types of things. And it seemed like, from at least what I've read, there's much more interest in wireless connectivity than with 4G, 3G, et cetera. Is this just an example of really the enhanced capabilities of 5G that lend themselves to sort of, I'll call it enterprise type installations like DoD is looking at?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of the idea that really both Bruce and Luciano were speaking of today, is that 5G has so many more capabilities. So whether it's the government, the DoD, healthcare, education, you name it, I think there's a lot more attention and interest in the 5G capabilities, and people, I should say, stakeholders are starting to read about it. They read about it in, whether it's a business magazine or a technology magazine or the newspaper, that 5G has new capabilities. And so it's great, because that's what gets the innovative thinking going, is how can we utilize this technology for our technology planning in the future. So in the US, yeah, the DoD came out and obviously has a lot of interest. And I think it's because they're seeing that there's a lot of opportunity there. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, for not just that industry, but all industries.
Yeah, so that's I think it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to follow what they come up with. Bruce, a fixed wireless access, that's obviously a big part of Bell's portfolio. You already have fixed wireless services on 4G. Will 5G change it, make it better? What role will fixed wireless play in the 5G world?
Well, in 5G, the channels can open up. So rather than aggregating LTE channels, you can open up and you can be more efficient, right? So with incremental, C-band spectrum and others, then we can, open it up. Today we have, 50. We can support a 5010. These are dedicated channels with outdoor units on the home. So, it's a compelling offer for streaming services, and we do run out of capacity sometimes and have to embargo. So we're looking forward to being in a position to augment that. But we're ready to pivot. The infrastructure is capable of pivoting to 5G, and we're in that process. So it will get there, and then we'll have future flexibility to add capacity and traffic density. Again, in a given sector, it can only support so many users. We can reach, though, the full extent of our footprint. So we can reach out to 14 kilometers, I think, is the limit. So basically, we can cover our wireless footprint with a fixed service. We challenge scaling down, where you've got very, very few customers, and it might be a bit of a challenge economically scaling down. But we can certainly look forward to a 5G implementation. And of course, that would be a slice that would be for fixed services, have its own characteristics. And again, that same radio would support mobility, albeit in a rural context, but would be there for dual purpose.
Okay, thanks very much. And Luciano, you see a lot in the news, and we get asked questions a lot about satellite now. You've got Telsat here in Canada, you've got Starlink coming into Canada, et cetera. And I think a lot of the commentary is a little bit misplaced, because some people are positioning satellite as a replacement for fiber or for fixed wireless or what have you. What role does satellite play for Canada, do you believe?
Yeah. So I think the answer to the question straight up is it's a complementary role. You know, we see satellite players as a complement to our 5G and even fixed networks build out. You know, we don't see a replacement. We don't see them as a one or the other. I think they have a space to play, a role to play. I think we can help each other. You know, we can collaborate with them. They can fix some specific use cases around backhaul for mobile towers or backhaul for remote communities. We see them as a partner in some areas, but if anything, it's part of the ecosystem of tools that we're going to have to really bring connectivity all the way to all the areas that today do not have good connectivity.
Okay, thanks very much. And really, for anyone, I mean, in terms of other complementary technologies, we've got Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and when we're talking about, indoors, private enterprises, etc., is 5G and Wi-Fi, are they friends or are they foes?
The answer is yes.
I would characterize it as being frenemies in a sense that, in the home, with gigabit fiber running into the home, 6E functionality, supported by most of the mobile devices would, is a pretty compelling capability, right? When you get out into public spaces and there's widely available wide area networking and slightly different thing with just the way that rate plans are evolving. I think it's less compelling in that environment, but certainly in the home, tremendous capability, and customers seem to be.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. I see Wi-Fi 6 as the next iteration of Wi-Fi, but really it's going to just evolve the in-home experience. It's a complementary technology. It works very well within the home. It's going to become harder and harder with next generation Wi-Fi 6 because the spectrum is also the spectrum doesn't get better when you go up. It becomes a little bit more complicated to manage. So it is a complementary technology, but it can work very well in confined spaces within the home. But I think you'll see at the beginning as it gets introduced, there's going to be a wow factor because spectrum is empty. There's not that many devices. It's new. It's shiny. But as more penetration of Wi-Fi 6 devices comes up and there's more interference with your neighbors and there's more devices, the problem will be compounded, I think. So next technologies that we have built into 5G that come out of the box on 5G around spectrum management, licensed spectrum, all these things don't really exist on Wi-Fi 6. So it's going to become a friend, but it's going to become a challenge for us to manage that experience within the home as well moving forward. So.
Yeah, and I won't add anything because I think Bruce and Luciano covered it quite well. The one thing that I think that needs to be looked at very carefully, and this is by governments throughout the Americas or the world, is when you start to think about the two technologies. Even though 5G can use unlicensed, and we're doing that with licensed LAA with licensed assisted access, it is decisions that need to be made by governments. When they start to think about spectrum allocations for licensed spectrum below 6 or unlicensed. So this becomes a little bit competitive in that frame of mind. But again, technologically and some of the use cases that Luciano and Bruce talked about, I would agree.
Thank you. And we've been getting a few questions around the issue of rural connectivity. And I'm not going to read one in particular. I'm going to kind of amalgamate them into one question. I think, in terms of what 5G means for rural connectivity, I think, Bruce, you kind of addressed that a bit in your answer about fixed wireless and how 5G and additional spectrums, et cetera, will help enhance the capabilities of fixed wireless. But another question that comes up and has come up is, how do you balance, there's lots of money being spent by all the operators to expand connectivity, both fixed and wireless to all Canadians. And they're doing that independently and also in conjunction with public funding. How how do you balance the need to connect Canadians, the underserved communities, with the need to continue to innovate and introduce advanced technologies like 5G? Or are they complementary, you know, from a, you know, fiber side or things like that?
Well, like I said, I mean, we can deploy fixed wireless and it can be used for mobile as well. So in that sense, you know, they work together. Deployment of fiber in general, you know, is a good thing. That the traffic density can generate it when you do a neighborhood of, you know, 4,000 homes per square kilometer is terabytes per square kilometer. So that's future proofing. It is expensive to get into rural areas. There's just no doubt about it. It can be $10,000 a home path, you know, and some of that can be subsidized. We think, you know, fixed wireless has got a good shot, but you know, people's usage keeps going up and up and up. And you know, the challenge of wireless is managing a finite resource. But I think for, you know, where we are today with, you know, 50-10 going to 100 shot with wireless, and fiber will continue to get deployed deeper and deeper and deeper into rural communities. And you know, our mobile networks are virtually all fiber connected, and that's transport fiber that gets pushed into communities that's available for other purposes. So in that sense, they work together, you know, that it's not one or the other, that one is feeding the other, and the other making, you know, fiber local access more economical because it's there for mobile.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the time. We're getting close to the top of the hour, but do you have a couple other questions that have come in that I want to ask? And maybe one for Luciano and one for Chris. Luciano, almost hate to ask this question, but we get a lot of questions now, or we get, you know, I get invitations to 6G events. We're just trying to get our heads wrapped around 5G still, at least those who are not deeply in it. Is that something that operators are spending much time thinking about 6G, or is that more, you know, the people are developing the standards and maybe, you know, some of the equipment vendors, et cetera? Like, is 6G something people, the layperson, should be concerned about too much these days?
That's a great question, Eric. You know, I think, you know, as technologies that we are, and given that this is such a generational change, 5G, you know, I'm always looking to understand where is the next generation technologies are coming, but I would not spend too much time on it at this stage. I think we are at the beginnings of our journey on 5G. I think that the world still needs to ingest all the power and value of 5G. I think it's great that we're talking about the 6G because we can feed challenges that we start finding today on 5G into the next generation to address them. But I would probably focus 99.9% of my time on getting 5G right, getting it first, getting it quickly, getting it at the right cost basis, and deploying it to all of Canada. You know, that's my use of my time, at least. And that would be my recommendation to you, Eric, as well.
I'll tell my boss that I don't need to spend time on 6G. That's good.
I would say LTE and 5G, the initial development was, you know, 8 to 10 years previous to when it was fully realized, right? So it really, it's accepting the fact that these things take a lot of time, and you got to evaluate, well, what are the drivers and what's the state of technology going forward? So it's about right to start thinking about it, but yeah, we wouldn't spend an awful lot of time. Our focus is on 5G and hitting the ball out of the park with that.
Yeah.
So one last question
5G Americas is not ready to change their name to 6G.
Yeah. You got all that branding and material. Yeah.
It's okay to think about next generation and think about those types of things. And I guess if there's going to be conferences, that's fine, and some research. But really, we're in the second inning of a 9-inning baseball game. We're in the first quarter of a 4-quarter football game. We're in the beginning stages of some great innovation that will continue with 5G for a long time. So I think our efforts are on 5G, even though, you know, there is that, you know, glimmer of the eye about what's going to be on the horizon.
And Chris, one quick question for you too is you have a new administration in the U.S. And I remember in the previous administration, sometimes I'd wake up to interesting tweets about things like nationalizing 5G and things like that. What's kind of in a real, like less than a minute, what's kind of the path forward for this administration, do you think, in terms of, you know, telecom? Is there any significant changes we should look out for?
Actually, right now it's a very calm situation coming out of our FCC and so forth. So right now, in 30 seconds or less, I think it will be a more measured approach to things. And I haven't heard anything about the nationalizing of 5G for quite a while now. So that's a positive. And I think if you look at the acting chairwoman Rosenworcel, she's continued some of the areas that were agreed upon last year, which would be the 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz moving forward with that mid-band auction later this year. So right now it's kind of like there's a fair amount of calmness, and I think we're all kind of waiting to see the overall bigger plans of the FCC. But so far, it's a positive, and the last administration did some. I don't want to get into the tweets and things like that, but there were some positives about what they did, bringing out a lot of spectrum to the market as well.
True, very much. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That's all that we have time for discussion. I'm going to turn it back over to Rob just for closing remarks.
Great. Thank you, Eric, for being our moderator today. And thank you to Luciano, Bruce, and Chris. I used to get to see you guys on the road every once in a while. I'm hoping with COVID getting near to the end that we'll get a chance to see each other in person, because it'd be great to catch up. But this was a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit about 5G. We're going to continue doing this. So our next virtual conference, virtual roundtable, we have scheduled for Wednesday, April 28th at 12 noon Eastern. We're hope that you're able to join us. We already have some exciting speakers lined up. Jefferson Wang from Accenture and Eric Bruno, Senior Vice President 5G Content and Connected Home at Rogers Communications. We'll be looking for some more as well. So if you want to learn about 5G, see what's coming down the road. There's lots of opportunities. And I think that this is truly an exciting time to be in the telecommunications industry. So thank you very much to all our panelists, and thanks for tuning in today.